Hi, I'm Nikki Doucet. I'm the CEO of the Women's Super League and the Women's Championship, and this is my Leaders Talk. Well, great to be here. So I'm Nikki. I'm the CEO of the Women's Super League and the Women's Championship. I'm here with an absolute rock star, Maria, who is the former CEO of Depop. So thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Nikki, but let's get this clear. I've only been here for 2 months, and you are the absolute star here.
No. So they told us we don't have a moderator. We're going to have a conversation, like what did they say, like a podcast?
Podcast, yeah.
Podcast type. So we have no idea how this is going to go, but we're excited to get right into it. So
let's do it.
So yeah, so thank you for joining me.
So yeah, I thought it would be good to kick things off if you could tell us a little bit about your journey to take the WPLL off the ground. I'm sure it was not an easy ride, was it?
No, it was not an easy journey at all. Definitely a long journey. Probably the most complex M&A transaction I've ever worked on, to get 23 clubs and the FA to all sign the same legal documents.
Crazy.
But yeah, I think, and when I look back though, over the last couple of years that I've been involved in, when I look back and I see passion and commitment, I probably have a little bit of PTSD, so I've blocked out a lot of stuff, but I think to get to this point, I do think you have to recognize, like, I know for women's football and where it is today, that I stand on, we all do, we all stand on the shoulders of giants that have, you know, worked so hard to get us to be in this position, and it's a real privilege and a deep sense of responsibility for that. So when I think about all of the clubs and all of the investment that they've made, the FA, all of the investment the FA has made, the, you know, key people that have been part of that, whether, you know, like a Sue Campbell or Kelly Simmons, even the support from Mark and Debbie at the FA, it's huge. But to get us to this point, ultimately, you have, everyone has a totally different point of view of how the leagues should be structured and how we should execute. I think the reason we were able to get to this point is because we all aligned on a shared vision and a shared purpose and a shared mission. Because everybody does have a different point of view, and trying to bring that all together is always really hard. And what makes me really encouraged is, and why this company is actually so important, is because it is the first time that there is an independent company. We've been an independent company for 62 days. So, you know, but we wake up every day thinking about women's football and how we're going to grow the women's professional game. That's never happened before in this country, so it's huge.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, for the little time that I've been around, I could tell that this care from everyone involved, it transpires. What's also very clear is that women's football in this country is at this inflection point where you've got the basics there, and you're just getting ready to scale up, right? So on that note, actually, before we go into the details of how this is all going to happen, can you tell us about your vision for the company? What's the aim here?
Yeah, I think we're guided by a bigger purpose. I think it starts with that. I think for any company to be guided by a bigger purpose is important. So ours is to leverage the power of women's football to inspire a more equitable society. And our aspirational vision, we say it's women's football transformed. So wherever you work within the world of women's football, you can apply that, because we are going on a transformational journey. We are in the scale-up phase. I use the startup language on purpose. And how we do that is through what we live, breathe day in, day out, which is, you know, to build the most distinctive, competitive, and entertaining women's football club competition in the world for the players and the fans of today and tomorrow. You know, and ultimately what we mean by that is, if we're the very best version of women's football globally, like, that is going to create massive value. So I feel like, though, I've said that vision, mission a lot in my world anyway.
Keep on saying it. Good.
When, you know, you've come on to our board, you're on our independent board. You know, when you hear that, does it resonate? Does it connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the reason why I joined, right? Actually, there were 3 main reasons why I wanted to join this board. The first one is I was super intrigued. As an outsider, I've seen the changes in perception towards the game. I'm not from this country, and when I remember very vividly when I was, when the Lionesses won the Euros 2 years ago, and I could feel this sense of pride, but at the same time, this realization that there was a lot of people following the game, the athletes, the stories, and yeah, you could see it happening. You could see how different it is to men's football, right? So that was my first reason. The second one is that I'm in a state in my career where I could be selective about the things that I do. And I want to work on initiatives that have a purpose and a positive impact in society. And it's true, by empowering young girls to play and by promoting equity in sports, you're just not just making a difference, you're also helping to change that biased perception. And lastly, I'm a big fan of growing things. My sweet spot is in the scale-up phase, which is basically when you have a product, a business that has a product market fit, which is it sort of meets the demands of the target customer, which is where I think women football is today. And I wanted to be involved. I wanted to bring my perspective from different industries and help reach its full potential.
Yeah, I mean, we are thrilled. We had our first board meeting a couple of weeks ago, which was incredible. So yeah, your perspective and also coming from the outside and into the scale-up has been huge for us. I think it does bring a different perspective.
Thank you. But anyway, this sounds all fantastic. Now, how are you going to make it happen?
Yeah, that's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? That someone, I think, said.
It's not going to be easy, is it?
No, it isn't. But it's super exciting. I mean, obviously, there's no question we've got a lot to do. Again, I keep going back. We are using the startup language on purpose. But in terms of how we execute, it ultimately goes back to the mission statement. So those 3 words in the mission statement are basically our priorities. So when we say distinctive, we mean we need to build a distinctive brand of football. This is a new category, a different product. You know, the experience of being a female athlete, of being a fan of women's sport is just a different experience. And so the fans are telling us how much they love that it is different, and we have to figure out how we really bring that to life in a tangible way. Competitive, it has to be exciting football. The competition has to be competitive. We have to have, you know, games of consequence, the best athletes, the best managers, the best referees. You know, that's what everybody wants to see. They want to see great football.
Okay, but tell me some numbers so that I can understand how big this is.
Well, I guess that would come into the entertaining part, which to me means the storytelling and ultimately creating that emotional connection. So one of the things we have done this year is move to YouTube for our non-TV picks. Which has totally outperformed our expectations so far. So I think the feedback we've gotten from the fans is that they want more content. They want it to be more accessible. So for the Women's Championship, I think it's giving those clubs more and those players more visibility. So we have 15,000 subscribers for the Women's Championship channel. And then for the Women's Super League, there's over 115,000 subscribers at the moment, you know, in the past couple of months. And we're seeing it's a younger demographic, so it's 17 to 30. They're watching it for 24 minutes, mostly on YouTube TV, which is interesting, and not necessarily on the mobile device. And it's a global audience. So even if you watch a Brighton game, the live chat's all in Japanese, which is really interesting. Cool. And so we're getting you know, bigger reach globally. But also, when you look at our numbers on Sky and on BBC, you know, our great broadcast partners, you know, we're performing really well. Last weekend, we hit over the million mark on BBC, which is only the 3rd time we've ever done that.
That's crazy. Now, when you talk about your strategy and the 3 words that you mentioned, right? Distinctive, competitive, and entertaining. I think it's so important to have that clarity. It just not only helps you to rally the troops towards that aim, but it also helps you to prioritize, because I'm sure you're going to have lots of things, and it's all going to come down to like making sure that the top ones are nailed down. Now, I'm sure you have other challenges. I think it would be very cool if you tell us, like, what are the biggest ones and how are you approaching them?
Yeah, I mean, of course there are challenges with any business or with any startup. There are them. I think there's 2 big ones, I think, that I'd probably highlight: the perception and the belief in the revenue potential. So I think when I think about perception, if you've heard me talk, you will hear me talk a lot about this. But I think changing the perception will help drive value of women's football and women's sport globally. So it starts with the word football. Our unconscious bias, I think, of a lived society and men's sport and how much we know men's sport because it's part of the fabric of our society. The word football means men's. And so I think qualifying it is important to help create an equitable opportunity to drive value. So, you know, the World Cup versus the Women's World Cup. One is then automatically worth more than the other versus if it was the Men's World Cup and the Women's World Cup. You know, it's the concept of creating equitable opportunities. And the second thing around the revenue, the belief in the future revenue model, I think is, again, creating that investment thesis. But I saw that play out when I worked at Nike, actually. So, so I was in charge of the women's business for the UK and Ireland for Nike going into the 2019 World Cup. So really
not that long ago.
Not that long ago, and then you had COVID. So when we would sell in Nike product, usually sell it into the market a year ahead of time. So I think this is summer 2018. And it was the first time ever Nike had made a football kit designed for a female body. Otherwise, it was just
prior to that, it was
a men's version that was made smaller. And we had put this, an entire assortment with other product around it, and we were trying to sell it into the marketplace, and nobody bought it. Because they're like, there's no sales history. This isn't a big thing. There isn't a market for this. You know, we're not putting our open to buy dollars against it. And so we're like, okay, how are we going to change? They don't believe it. How do we make them believe in something that technically doesn't exist yet when we know it's going to exist? So we did a 2-day sales summit. We brought all the buyers from all of the major retailers in this country, and you know, brought the product team over to tell them the design story and the inspiration behind it. We brought in, you know, the players, the coach of the England team, the media, you know, and also our brand team, telling them about the investment that was going to happen, but also we brought in the fans. And the fans ultimately were saying, and the voice of the fan is like, no, 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 we want to buy this stuff. We want the opportunity to be able to do that. So fast forward another month, we actually had a pretty big order book off the back of that. Still some skeptics, but then fast forward the year, and it was at that time the biggest women's sport event, and they bought wrong. So they didn't have the size curve right. Everything sold out, and you'll never now go backwards. That market now exists because we built it, we invested in it, and so it might take longer, but there's a market there that wants to be served that had never been served before.
You make me think about my own experience where I was basically facing a lot of skepticism. And I keep thinking, like, whenever you are disrupting, you're naturally going to face skepticism. I think Gerard Piqué told us about this yesterday, about the Kings League, right? And so for me, it was very much about having this conviction. And it came from two factors. One was users. So we were talking to our users constantly.
So when you were talking to your users for Depop, that was an online marketplace for secondhand
Yes,
clothing.
I don't know how many of you know it, by the way. Any hands on?
Yes.
People? Okay,
okay,
good.
good.
I see some. Good. So we were extremely close to them. We wanted to understand why they like it so much and how we're engaging with it. And then data. You need objective data that shows you how things are starting up. And the one thing that struck me the most at the beginning was that it was mainly organic. So users were encouraging other users to come along. And yeah, the amount of interactions that we had in the app at the very beginning, it was crazy. So for a very small amount of users, we had 10 times, 20 times the amount of messages, likes. And so I could see that. And so despite all of that, I would still have investors coming to me and say, no, this is a very small category. This is never going to be big. This is too niche. And I was like, what the fuck? I mean, this is huge already. Like, can you see it? And only when I started to talk to investors that, guess what, had teenage kids, and they could see their Depop packages in their kitchens, they start to believe. So going forward, any fundraise meeting that I would have, I would say, okay, how many of you have teenage kids here?
Yeah.
And it helped. It definitely helped.
But I even when, just going back to when I worked at Nike, we would use Depop as a case study and an example of a company that knew its user base really, really well. And so I think I see a lot of parallels between that, what you went through, and also what we're going through to try and make sure we know our fan base as best we possibly can and serve them as best we possibly can.
Cool. But anyway, in terms of getting support from others, how are you leaning on your partners? How important they are in this journey for you?
Yeah, I don't think you can grow anything without partners. And partners for us, I think one of the other things I've learned being in this role so far is just how complex the entire environment is. You know, we're part of a broader ecosystem in the world of football. So partnering with our key stakeholders like the LMA, the PFA, the PGMOL for managers, players, referees. You know, when we look at other leagues like the EFL or Premier League, we've taken on a loan from the Premier League, but as part of that, we're also able to learn from them in terms of how they actually put on the delivery, which at this stage of our growth is really helpful. The FA, of course, are a massive partner. You know, having a strong England team in the future and a strong domestic league, you know, I don't think those two things have to be independent of each other. And obviously, being connected to the rest of the pyramid for the talent pathway and for grassroots is hugely important. You know, and of course, our commercial partners are critical for growth. Going back to the revenue point I made earlier, you know, we're thrilled that Barclays has doubled their investment.
That's incredible, yeah.
You know, they're staying on as our title sponsor. I think it's the single largest women's sport investment globally, so I think they are showing their leadership in the space, but it's also showing that, you know, they're a bank. They go through numbers. They wouldn't be doubling their investment if they didn't see it, one, having a return, and also seeing the future potential of this. So, you know, a little bit of a plug here. We are working right now on our go-to-market strategy. And I do think there will be an opportunity, a short opportunity for a few select partners to come in and see this as a first mover advantage, hopefully, to help be part of the future growth of this. So I go back to
many of them here.
Yeah, hopefully. But I go back to the thing that you just said earlier around data and numbers. You know, when I look at the numbers and what we have today, I've talked about, you know, the viewership that we have through YouTube, through Sky and BBC that are performing well. Our video views, our social engagement is probably, we see engagement almost 2 times more than what you might see in some men's sport. When I look at attendance, though, you know, our WSL attendance is up 12% season to date. Our championship attendance is up 75% season to date. And to me, all of that is arguably organic growth. You know, we're coming off a summer where we haven't had a Women's World Cup or a Women's Euros. And we don't have, and we don't have the marketing budgets that other industries or other sports might have. So to me, that again points to the opportunity that this is, and if we can continue to refine our execution strategy and how we come to life and find the right partners, and obviously the clubs are part of that too. They're both the shareholders, but also you know, critical partners on this growth journey. You know, I just think we're building, it's the first generation of fandom for women's professional sport, of the professional leagues in this country. And I think, you know, we tap into that. The lifetime value of that fan is immeasurable. Cool. You know, and so we've talked a lot about this. You're relatively new to coming in to this industry. You know, I'm just curious to know what you have found to be the most striking.
Yeah, so I think the first one will be the passion. I mean, you can tell from just listening to you, it's so contagious. I see it across the board with your team, the WPLL team, the FA, the clubs. Everyone that I interact with is so passionate, and it's great. And I think it's an amazing opportunity for you to continue to bring great talent. We struggle a lot to get engineers to work in fashion. You don't have that problem, right? So that's great. Now, passion, I think, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, right? If there's too much passion, then there's also a lot of emotions. And in business, it's not always great to be emotionally attached to things. And it also makes people to be willing to be involved in every decision. And unfortunately, that makes things slower, right? And so if we want a game that is very fast and agile, we also need to apply that to us, right?
Yeah, totally agree. I'd say I probably should have mentioned one of the key challenges was also the key stakeholder management and managing all of the emotion that comes with that, and finding the right balance between that is really important. Okay, so I'm just looking at time over here. So I thought we'd end with a few quick-fire questions before maybe we'll take questions from the audience. So, what's the last game you've been to this season?
The London City Lionesses against Charlton, my first championship game at the Bromley Stadium.
Nice.
What about yours?
I think my last one I went to was Liverpool versus Leicester up in Liverpool because they were opening up their new women's stadium.
Oh, how is it?
Yeah, it was fantastic. Although it rained the whole day, it was a little cold, but still a great game.
It's normal. We're in England.
Exactly. Do you have a favorite kit?
Don't, but I would say any kit that would make it to the Depop Vintage Classic would be.
Yes.
But if you were to push it, I would say the Inter Miami one, the pinky, because it's the Barbie, year.
I like that.
I would say that, yeah.
I think I'd have to say I did really love the Arsenal Aries Koblet
that's
that
great.
just came out.
That would
I love
make it to the
Aries,
Depop
and I have some of their hoodies at home.
Yeah.
But I love that they kind of went through the sport and culture piece. I just think that's super cool. Okay,
Totally.
favorite player of all time?
Mia Hamm. I mean, not just because of her achievements, but her cultural impact in the sport.
Yeah, I had her poster on my dorm room in university. I was going to say Rachel Yankee, but then as a Canadian, I definitely have to say Christine Sinclair, who's a Canadian icon and also the leading goal scorer, male or female.
Oh.
Tip from the top. Who's your favorite current player at the moment?
Well, I'm Spanish. I'm going to say Spanish player, Aitana Bonmatí. She's not in the WSL yet.
Oh, she wants to be.
But yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But if thinking about WSL, I would say Guro Reiten. I think she's not just super, her skills in the pitch, her intelligence is great, but I love the way she engages with the fans. What about you?
Well, it's hard to say. I feel like I should be neutral on everything, but I will say Bunny Shaw because she just scores goals and I just love watching her. Okay, last one. Who's your favorite club?
We want everyone to win, don't we?
Yes, I can't pick. I want everybody to win.
Great.
All right, so let's see if we can take some...
I'm supposed to have some questions here.
We should have questions.
There were some cricket questions, so...
I don't think I can answer anything on cricket.
Don't worry, it's refreshing.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, for Nikki, start with you. Anonymous. How big can the WSL become commercially, and where does the value lie for brands? This is a tough one. Should I skip it? Or do you want to take it?
See, this is good at not having a moderator. Yeah, we could choose. Going forward, I will not put any numbers of the growth. I won't say a number forward because I also think the growth potential is unlimited. And I also have learned working in publicly traded companies, when you put a big number out there, you start to make decisions just to hit that number. And I think you have short-term thinking around that. And I think the biggest thing we have to obsess is the great product. And if we have an amazing competition with great football, the best players, we're building a talent pathway to continue to sustain it going forward, which I do think is critical. The fans are going to want to watch that. And that ultimately will continue to drive our reach, our viewership, everything. So it'll be a no-brainer for any brand because we'll have the history at that point to show that this this is the next few decades of sport that require investment at the, right now to get it to the place that it needs to be. But there's no question the potential is unlimited.
Yeah, totally. Another anonymous, talking about Christine Sinclair and correct the internet, how do we all come together to change the men's and women's language? When will BBC and others change language?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that perception point I talked about earlier. I think it's in every conversation that you've had. Did you see the game on the weekend? Was it the men's game or the women's game? I think it starts in cultural conversations. Being if you're in a meeting and you see, there's a presentation and it's only, male athletes, but it's also supposed to be talking about a female sport, calling that out. And I think it's a collective to constantly ask the questions, point out where the discrepancies are and where there are opportunities to make sure that we're creating those equitable opportunities.
Yeah, totally. With the link between domestic game and international team and results, will there be an increase in the home ground allocation clubs must have?
And that's
another good
a technical question. I'd say at the moment we are going through a workshop on the homegrown player rules, and also all of that that's under review at the moment. It's the thing that we have. The women's game just has a smaller talent pool of the top talent globally. And I think, all the investment that's coming in, I've talked about the talent pathway a little bit, but it is critical to make sure we're continuing to have the investment to give access for girls to want to play football, and then having the ability to come up through all the places to be able to play to have that. But it is something that we're looking at. I can't say anything more definitively at the moment, only that it is being worked on.
Yeah. Another question in terms of marketing tactics. You mentioned football and culture. There's a huge cultural moment in women's football with fans creating watch parties, women's sports bars, etc. How can you collaborate with these fans? Are you collaborating with them, actually?
Yeah, yes. One, I think it's amazing. I think all the research that's coming through, like what She's a Baller is doing is amazing. What all of the watch parties are coming on is great. Our team in some ways is really getting up and running. Like I said, we've been an independent company for 62 days, but absolutely we want to collaborate. We want to create as many opportunities to create that community. I think some of our research is actually saying a large percentage of people who are going to the games are buying individual tickets. How do we continue to help those fans find the community and be part of something? So I think it's something at the moment we're absolutely aware of. I think we need to have continued engagement with all of those partners, because ultimately, the fans are the ones that will drive and create the ultimate success of this league.
Cool. Going back to media, what are you looking for most from your next cycle of media partnerships? It's a bit broad, but...
I think it's a combination of, well, one, I think we have great broadcast partners in BBC and Sky. I think it's a combination of both the reach and revenue question is obviously the big question, and making sure we're also continuing to build our global audience. I think the YouTube data is definitely showing we have that, and it's I think arguably one of our bigger opportunities, coupled with obviously domestic. It's an important question because we're still in the drive awareness, create demand phase. And that is generally an expensive phase of any business cycle.
It's an investment phase. Basically.
It is an investment phase. And so I do think it's a combination of reach coupled with the revenue in terms of what we need to invest in the business.
Going back to YouTube, what drove the decision to move from FA Player to YouTube? And what's the potential, you think?
I think FA Player served its purpose and was a great tool to at the time. And I think we just found that it didn't have the technical capabilities to keep up with the demand that we're ultimately seeing. And I think YouTube as a platform today has been able to serve that demand, certainly in the short term. And it's ultimately, I think, going back to driving awareness, creating demand, giving fans accessibility to watch and engage, and make it as easy as possible for them.
I've got a controversial question for you. Are you ready for it?
Okay. Maybe.
Ooh. Knowing that women's football fans are very different to men's football fans, will women's football fans ever be able to have beer in the stands at stadiums in England? How do you answer that?
We are testing that in a couple of teams in the championship this season, and we'll see what we learn from that. I think our fan base and the behavior is different, and I think ultimately it's about being able to give our fans choices while obviously maintaining the safety and what we need to do from being responsible from that perspective.
I love this question. Would you like to see UEFA Article 48 change so WSL games could be held and screened in the 3 p.m. Saturday slot? Can this actually happen, please? Please tell us, can.
You were supposed to like filter the questions.
Oh, yeah, I know, but it's impossible. This tool is not good for that.
Article 48. I have learned a lot about Article 48 in the past year.
You're a lawyer by degree, no?
No, but I have read a lot of legal documents. Look, I think going back to there's complexity of being in this broader ecosystem. We are part of the broader football ecosystem. We share a lot of the same shareholders with the Premier League and the EFL. And so we need to be really thoughtful around, the purpose of why that's there. And at the moment, it's something that will stay and isn't something that we are able to access. I do think as we work together, and that's why going back to the concept of partnership is so important, is that we have to work together to figure out, we're sharing stadiums, the fixture scheduling, the broadcast scheduling, all of that's really important. And so we have to work together to figure out how we can make sure all the fans are being served as best they can.
Totally. How willing are you to take risks on innovative solutions within the WSL? Do you see innovation as a unique opportunity given the tradition in the men's game? I do, by the way.
Do you want to answer that one?
No.
What was the first part of the question again?
It's innovation. How important you think is taking risk?
Oh, I think we have to take risk. I think in some ways I do. One of the things I am encouraged by, I think, with the discussions we've had with all of the clubs, them becoming the shareholders, I do think there is a mandate to innovate, to be as bold as we possibly can, to figure out what's right for our fan base, what's right for our shareholders, and where are the moments to test and learn. I keep saying we can't be afraid to try new things, and maybe some things will work, some things they won't. But that's again being in this startup scale-up journey. We have to be able to test and learn and figure out what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, totally.
Fail fast, fail cheaply, move forward.
Good, an easy one for you. Who's going to win the Euros next year?
England.
Of course.
That was an easy one.
I think I'm going to take another one.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Are you still?
Okay.
Are you ready? Do you prepare any marketing campaign with motto?
Do I what?
A motto.
A motto.
Like a sort of, I guess, slogan or something.
Okay.
Isn't time management to kick off the league a bit pity together with rugby champions next year? Or do you see some connection points there? I realize there's two different questions, but...
Asking me about the brand or the marketing of both leagues?
Yes, that's the second one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are now the company that both leagues are our shareholders. We're in charge of both of them. It's important that we grow both of them and that we grow the commercial value, I think, of the championship as well as growing the commercial value of the WSL. And figuring out how we do that, I think that's what I can say right now.
Good. Actually, there's another one that I forgot to ask that is good. I cannot find it now, but it was around the partnership with men's football. How is that working at the moment, and how do you foresee work in the future?
Yeah, going back to, we're part of a broader football ecosystem, and I think you look at, I think the clubs are investing. I think they're, again, learning around how you market to a different fan base. When I think you've built an entire business and a brand identity on men's football, on a men's football fan base, it's a different investment. It's a different risk capital for women's right now in the phase that we're in versus the phase of men's football. And so I think finding the innovators, the thought leaders. I just listened to a really good podcast this morning that Paul Barber did, and how they're thinking through investing in their team and what they're looking at. So I think, there's an interconnection, there's a relationship that's really important, and we're at different phases of our journeys. And so I do think and actually going back to one of the questions around like the language and everything, I think, using men's football also and the athletes themselves, when I look at like what the NBA is doing with the WNBA and the players and how they show respect to the WNBA players, I think that also helps validate, the WNBA and the league and what that looks like. But they're not doing it, like, it's very authentic. They train with the players. They know that they're great basketball players. I'd love to see more of that as well in terms of just, it's not just, grassroots or, these are elite athletes who are incredibly inspiring. And I think, we've seen some really good examples of that so far this season, which hasn't happened before. We had our first social media post with the Premier League and us. I think you're seeing a couple of the clubs start to really have better, interesting content between the men's and women's teams, which I just think is helpful for the fans to see. Some of our fans that are what we're calling the secondary fan, that live and breathe and love men's football and are obviously fans of the clubs and are starting to find the women's game, and they might not have necessarily capacity for all of it, but they're bringing their kids to the game because they might think that's the entry point to introduce their kids to the club. But they specifically are saying, we want more content from our club on the women's team. So I think again, we're at the beginning of like learning what this fan base wants, what we need to do, how much, the investment that's required, and then the path to a bigger commercial model.
There's more questions that keep coming, and they're quite great.
Okay.
Can I continue? How can the WPLL help grassroots football to ensure there is a future pathway for homegrown players?
Yes. So I think it's about having the right relationship with the FA. So obviously the FA is responsible for grassroots. We need to make sure that the tip of the pyramid, that the WSL and the championship are generating the revenues, one, to support the top of the pyramid, but equally, the top of the pyramid should be able to support the bottom of the pyramid. So we have to make sure that that is working. And it is all interconnected. We have to have, the right grassroots programs, the right talent pathway, the program academies, what that looks like, how the investment that's required there, how the clubs are continuing to develop players. There's a lot of work that has to be done.
On that note, do you see improvements in that already?
Yeah,
or it's too early to say.
Yes, I think the speed and the speed of growth. I was looking at numbers last night on something that, again, has shifted so much versus a year ago, that the arguments that people have been using are now dated because the speed of change is accelerating so fast. And our challenge is making sure we can get the infrastructure to catch up with, I think, where the players are, where the market is, where the fans, and the expectation of the fans and the players, I think, and everybody else, you know, are super high.
Totally. And do you think, going back to why I joined and the Euro win of England, is the success of the WSL still related to England winning the Euros, you think?
Well, I don't know that's, well, there's no question, obviously, the Euros and the Lionesses winning helped propel this. I go back to the point that we haven't had a summer with a Euros or a World Cup, and our attendance, our viewership, like every metric you look at is still up, which to me points to there's a fan base that's there that is growing more organically, but also wants to continue to be engaged. I think having a strong England team is really important. I think the Lionesses have been incredible, and I also think they're driving a lot of the fan bases. You know, some of the research that She's a Baller just did suggested people will change their club allegiance if a player moves. So that I think they said something like 41% of people that they asked would change from being a Chelsea fan to a Brighton fan because Fran Kirby moved.
Wow.
And I just think you don't see that same type of behavior in the men's game today.
Definitely not.
Which is really interesting. And so the players are really important. But again, I think the connection between us and the FA, especially at this stage, is just incredibly important. Because I think the pyramid is interconnected. Everything impacts everything else. There's so much to do, but how to prioritize so that we're both making sure that the top two leagues are as successful as possible, but equally making sure the talent pathway is allowing for the future generation of talent to come through.
Totally. Another question on social media and growth. What role do you see social media and Gen Z engagement playing in the growth of the WPLL? The NBA players engage heavily online with the WNBA. How far do you think this goes? And how does the landscape in the UK need to change to accommodate this sort of engagement?
Well, I think social media is obviously a key marketing tool and a key communication tool. So, you know, being really thoughtful on the strategy for each of those channels. You know, obviously I think we have a really strong Gen Z. We've done our fan segmentation not necessarily on demographics, because we actually found, based on our research, we were segmenting our fans based on their relationship to football, and we found that that was the commonality of how we can then approach and find the right strategy to make sure we're giving them what they want, and bringing them into our ecosystem, if you will, and being in their ecosystem. But we found Gen Z across every single fan group, no matter whatever their relationship to football. I think the other one that's really important, though, is our strategy for Gen Alpha. And some of the research we're still going back to that point on...
How old is Gen Alpha?
Like we went down and we've interviewed, you know, kids as young as 10, because we didn't have that type of research.
My daughter, by the way.
Yeah. We should talk to her and see what she thinks too. So I think having a strategy around them and how they consume and football is really important, how they see women's football. We're seeing in some of the research that it's still not cool to be a fan of women's football on the playground, and we need to continue to shift that, I'd say, old school mentality or perception, if you will. And so we're building out what our strategy is for that particular fan group, because we know, and across every sport, I'll tell you, you know, fandom is made by a really young age. So if you don't get them by 12, 13, 14, you know, it's much harder to bring them into the community later on. So I do think that having that strategy, finding the right partners, for that particular age group is really important.
Cool, an interesting one. Do you see advertising and promotional opportunities for the women's game that are actually different or more exciting than the games, the men's game?
I think it's just, I think there are probably brands that may not have ever thought of like a sport advertising or sport sponsorship would be possible. So some people that we're talking to would never think about men's football, but also because that's not their user base or that's not the consumer that they're going after. So I think being more as thoughtful and as transparent as we can on who is the audience that we have, the fan base, the data that we have on them, where they are, our engagement, the reach. We know that our fans are responding to brands that are investing in us. You know, I think Barclays has definitely seen that in terms of their brand awareness and also brand loyalty and the positive sentiment that the consumer sees to their brand by being associated with the WSL and the Women's Championship. And I think all of a sudden, you know, you only need one or two, and then you know, there's a tipping point at some point. And I think we're on the verge of that, and that'll continue to grow for, you know, this isn't going away, and this is, we have such an incredible opportunity for, you know, being the very best version of women's football globally.
Okay, this has been amazing. There's a big one here. Again, I lost it because it keeps on going up and down. But it was something around, do you see a world where women players pay will reach the level of the men's players?
If I had a crystal ball for that answer, I wouldn't be sitting up here. I'd be on a beach somewhere.
That is such a great answer.
Really.
And with that,
yeah,
I think it's time to finish today.
Yeah,
I think it's been amazing. I hope you enjoyed.
Yes.
I definitely enjoyed it.
Thank you for being up here with me.
I loved it.
All right. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much.